about this flurry of executive orders we've seen. President Biden ran on a pledge to restore unity. He promised on Inauguration Day he'd be a president for all Americans, but since he's gotten into office, he's been largely acting unilaterally. I mean, we saw a record-breaking number of executive orders. He has not yet met with lawmakers on Capitol Hill, and we're not even quite sure who he's talking to on Capitol Hill. So what do you say to Americans who are watching all of these executive orders? And does the White House think that this is the best way to make policy, considering an opposing president could come back in 4 years from now and erase all the work he's done with the stroke of a pen?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, so let me try my best. First, the president put forward a large and bold COVID relief package, $1.9 trillion, that is meant to address the challenges the American people are facing and the dual crises that that the country is facing, from the pandemic to an economic recession as a result. That package has the support of the majority of Americans, according to every poll that we have seen publicly released. So I would say first that part of unifying the country is addressing the problems that the American people are facing and working to reach out to Democrats and Republicans to do exactly that. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's had calls with Democratic and Republican members of Congress, many of them. He's doing more calls today, but he's doing calls regularly throughout the week and has done them back to when he was inaugurated and even before then. But he's also calling Democratic and Republican mayors and governors to talk to them about what their needs are on the ground. So his objective as president is to deliver on what he promised in his inaugural address, govern for all of the American people by focusing on addressing the issues that people are facing that aren't just hitting blue states or red states, aren't just hitting Democrats or Republicans, but are crises that we are all facing. And I think the polls will tell you that people are responding to that. In terms of executive actions, he also ran with a commitment to take steps immediately to address the pain and suffering that the American people were feeling. And that includes overturning some of the detrimental, harmful, and at times immoral policies and actions of the prior administration. But he's the first to tell you, as he said many times publicly, he's not going to take executive action alone. That's why he's put forward a number of packages that he's actively working with members of both parties to move forward on. Go ahead.
Jen, I have a couple of foreign policy issues.
Sure.
The first one is on Taiwan. Chinese Defense Ministry spokesman said yesterday that the Chinese military activities in the Taiwan Strait is a necessary response to foreign intervention, and that any efforts towards independence means war. Does the administration believe that Beijing is testing the U.S. on the issue of Taiwan, and how would you respond?
Well, the good news is that my longtime friend John Kirby is giving a briefing today at the Department of Defense, and I would certainly refer you to him and any comments he makes on this specific issue.
So the administration believes that schools need more funding for them to be safe enough to reopen for students to go back. But there's been a number of studies, including the recent one out of the CDC, that have shown evidence that schools are perfectly safe for students to go back, and there were recommendations that they should go back. So this seems like a bit of a dispute between teachers' unions and sort of data and the science. So where does the administration stand in that dispute?
Well, first, let me be absolutely clear. President Biden wants schools to open, and he wants them to stay open because it's obviously very disruptive for families. I'm a mother, for anyone who has kids, for kids to come in and out of school. But that means making sure, as you said, that every school is able to have the equipment and resources to open safely. Not just rural schools or private schools, which often is where a lot of the school reopenings and schools staying open is happening. It's more of a challenge in public schools where they don't have that funding from tuition or smaller populations where it's easier to put in place the actions needed to keep the schools open. But the CDC study, which I know has received a lot of attention, was based on kind of an area that was more rural in Wisconsin. It was not, and I think what Dr. Walensky has said is that, and I think she said this on CNN last night, is that for areas where they are more populated, where schools where is a lot more foot traffic, that there are going to need to be a lot of steps put in place in order to make the schools reopening safe. But we are committed to doing that. That's why the president signed an executive order last week supporting the safe reopening of schools. It requires the Departments of Education and CDC to provide evidence-based guidance. So that will include things like testing, smaller class sizes, more ventilation, better cleaning, PPE, strong state and local public health guidance. But we want to provide that clarity from the federal government, because there's a lot of confusion, and public schools especially don't know what steps they need to take, how to ensure they're safe. Those are all good decisions that are going to be made locally, but we want to give them the guidance. That's in process. Our team is working on that. Dr. Walensky, the CDC, and our health experts, and we hope to have more specifics soon.
Maybe two more questions.
Go ahead.
So American savings rate has been up throughout the pandemic, and so I'm wondering, why give all Americans a $1,400 check, and why not means test for the relief that your administration is talking about?
Well, first, the proposed checks, I mean, have the same criteria as the package that received broad bipartisan support in December, right? So approximately the $1,400 checks would go to families making approximately $150,000 a year. There's a scaling up, as I think you're referencing, up to about $300,000. I think you all are aware of this, but just for everybody else. And, you know, there has been some questions about that. President Biden, our economic team, we're open to discussing that. But we want to ensure that the families that need relief, that need assistance, get it. And I would say at a time where we saw the economic data today, and this was reflected in Brian Deese's statement, it was worse than any week, I don't want to misquote myself here, than that we saw during the Great Recession. I mean, people are suffering. Millions of people are out of work. People don't know how to put food on the table. These challenges are real. The data shows it, but we also see long lines for food pantries. We see, people who are out of work and don't know what they're going to do to make ends meet. And so that's tangible, that's real, and we want the package is going to need to be big and bold to address that.
Can I ask one more about the travel restrictions?
Sure, go ahead, and Caitlin, then we'll go to you.
A lot of our viewers are asking if there will be any kind of consideration for waivers for students or unmarried couple like fiancés, since that is now the requirement for testing and quarantine.
Well, I know there's been a lot of coverage of this and questions, because these are people's lives and human beings who are missing their loved ones and their family members. And just to restate what the requirements are now. So spouses of American citizens and lawful permanent residents are able to travel under these restrictions we've put in place on international travel, although they have to take part in the mandatory pre-departure testing that applies to everyone. And we are reviewing and assessing, I should say, how students and unmarried couples and how we can proceed with that moving forward. I don't have anything to preview for you, but our team is looking into that.
Okay, and last question on this. So President Biden has said he wants all schools to reopen in his first 100 days. Is that still the goal if Congress does not pass this proposal, which has the money for schools, which Ron Klain and others have said is what they believe schools need to reopen?
I sense skepticism about the bill getting passed. We don't feel that. Look, I think the reason... I know, that's your job. Look, I think, Caitlin, one of the reasons why we're so focused on the American Rescue Plan and getting it urgently passed through Congress is because we need this funding in order for schools to reopen and for them to have the support to ensure that they have proper ventilation, better cleaning, testing, PPE. That's a key component of the package. And that's one of the reasons we're not going to negotiate out that versus vaccine funding or unemployment insurance, because that's a key component, and we need that to ensure that schools will have the resources across the country to be able to reopen, and that's exactly what the president wants to happen.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Oh, okay, we're good. She was very patient. Go ahead.
Thank you.
I just wonder if there is a general sense of frustration just about the pace of things, given the vaccine distribution, some of what you inherited from the Trump administration, trying to roll out executive orders, working with Congress and sort of having some lawmakers raise concerns. Is it harder to change things than you all thought it would be?
I'm only laughing because we're on our 8th day here. So, and in that period of time, the president has signed multiple executive orders. He has proposed several comprehensive bills. He's had many conversations with members of Congress about the urgency of getting things done. And I will say, in those conversations, there is an understanding and agreement about the urgency of addressing these issues. So no, we're actually pretty hopeful and optimistic about the opportunity and the ability to work with Democrats and Republicans to get packages through to help bring relief to the American public. But we also recognize that members of Congress have, they're not wallflowers. They have different points of view. They have lots of ideas. They're going to bring those forward. We're hearing them, and we're just eager to move things forward as quickly as we can. But we're on day 8, so we are confident we're still on a pretty rapid pace here. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate all of you. I'll be in my office. Thanks for your time, and we'll do this again tomorrow.